Okay.
What's up, everybody? I'm BobbyFi. I'm back here with the man you may know from the poker world. You may know from many different worlds. This is Eric Sheets Haber, and we're going to be going through a little bit of his lineup construction. We've been friends for a while, and we're going to talk a little bit about today's DFS slate. We're going to go game by game, but we're going to start off by just Sheets talking a little bit about his the way he builds lineups for DFS. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I do mine. And we're going to get into the game by game, just do a little video for you guys. This is the first one for the two of us together, so bear with us. There'll hopefully be many more to come, but we're just going to sort of go through the slate and see what we think. Sheets, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. I got to say, it's a little intimidating, Bobby. You know, it's been a long road from the poker world, and I've been doing DFS now for like 2.5 years, and partially thanks to you, I've been pretty successful at it. And it's always a struggle out there, and it's always a challenge. But I'm happy to see if maybe I can add something to this, and we'll see what happens.
All right, yeah, man, I'm happy to be doing this with you. I've actually been looking forward to this for a while. So let's jump in. You built a sort of shell lineup, and we were talking just sort of general strategy of how you'd go, because on a slate like tonight, we have a lot of I don't even want to say that it's all good chalk, but it is. There's a lot of guys who are going to be popular that I like quite a bit. So we can talk about it. You can sort of just talk. We were talking a little pre-show, and maybe give us a little rundown of sort of what you're thinking and how you'll pivot off of and build out your lineups.
Well, I guess, you made a very important first point, is that we are going to be talking about GPPs here, because that's really the only thing that I do. I mean, I'm not really a cash guy. That's just not my thing. And it's kind of interesting, because when I transitioned from poker, people always gave me the advice, you should start off with cash, because, you were kind of a solid poker player also. So maybe GPPs aren't for you, but you know what? I was just one of those guys that always wanted to play. If I was going to do DFS at all, I would want to try to win those big tournaments. So, and that's kind of a struggle I always have to fight, is the kind of desire to make the best plays all the time, and to be, I don't want to say, and not to go too far off the board. But the point is that when you're really trying to win these things, the good thing is that with all the ownership projections there are out there, you can force yourself to kind of do the right thing if you have to. You know what I mean? As long as, your projections are at least close to quote unquote the best plays, having those ownership projections out there do allow you to kind of force yourself to be different. And it kind of takes me away from my normal kind of, personality of being solid and being chalky or whatever. But the fact that there are ownerships out there that kind of force me to be contrarian, it kind of helps. So what I try to do at the beginning is just kind of start off with shell lineups where I just kind of have good plays. At least in my head, what's good plays. And usually what ends up happening is when I have a shell lineup, I'm like, okay, I want to put this in, but then I look at it and I'm like, okay, this is going to be something that everybody has. So that's when I have to start really force feeding myself, all that good stuff about GPPs, like force feeding myself correlations, both on my team and, and the run backs, and force feeding kind of low owned stuff, and trying to not get too low owned and trying to get not too far off the board. So today, fortunately, some of the plays kind of just handed themselves to me. It was kind of funny when I was first looking at the slate, Bobby. I was like, wow, I couldn't believe LeBron James was going to be 10-7 and AD was going to be 9-4. I mean, that's just kind of a huge joke. I mean, AD is going to be just incredibly popular. He's probably going to be a lock. And I guess they kind of knew in the back of their heads that there was a chance that AD was going to be ruled out, right? So yeah. when AD got ruled out, my first comment, okay, well, LeBron James is chalk. He's probably a lock, but let's just put him in from the beginning and see what goes on. And the second thing I kind of noticed is, well, Kyle Kuzma, who was a huge usage guy last year, it's obviously going to be not the same with LeBron and AD, but now he's back with apparently no minutes restriction, and coincidentally, AD is out on the same night, and he's 4,100. I mean, I kind of find it difficult to leave him off at least a shell lineup. Again, we're not talking about who's going to be chalky or whatever yet, but I mean, to not have him at 4,100 seems a little bizarre. So I put him as one of my core. And then, even though I'm just kind of building good plays, I always like to at least start off with some correlation and run it back with somebody. So I put D'Angelo Russell in. Now, one thing, if we do enough of these things, Bobby, we're going to probably have enough fights between narrative and non-narrative, right? And, one of the first things that we talked about, you first coached me the first day, was really, listen, in basketball, narrative matters, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like a math guy. So to tell me about narratives is like, you're really talking to the wrong guy. And actually one of the first narratives that we talked about, which I kind of like laughed at, was back when D'Angelo Russell was playing for the Nets and he went into LA, and you're like, you don't understand. Like, when he goes into LA, he goes crazy. I'm like, come on, you got to give me a break. And he happened to have gone crazy. Now, again, it's only one sample as far as I was concerned. But the fact is that narrative or not, he's an incredibly high usage guy. He's probably the only guy on the team. And now that Draymond's back, he can spread out a little bit. But if there's an easier guy to run it back with, I can't find it, right? So I figured I would just put Russell in with these two guys.
I do think there's a little bit of merit if you're going to play that game to maybe taking a look at Draymond Green just because of his price being so low. But I totally agree. That's obviously what stands out.
Yeah, and then it's going to depend that again, like when we break this kind of shell lineup down and try to even either stack a game or unstack it or correlate or make it less correlated. Draymond is definitely, I mean, obviously the next guy as far as I was concerned, as far as who I would put from the Golden State side in this. Now the other game that kind of stood out at me was this Memphis Charlotte game, and it's kind of funny just because who would have thought that the absence of Dwayne Bacon or whatever was going to be like a big deal or something like that. And I don't know, but like, to take a 3,400 guy out and make that a big deal, it actually turned out to be kind of interesting for me. First of all, Terry Rozier, I played him recently at much higher prices than this, at 7,100, and he's 5,600 now. He's against Memphis, who they're not the same Grizzlies that we remember, right? I mean, they play a little bit faster. And all this stuff is baked into the projections, obviously. But the fact of the matter is that he's going to rate as a really good value play. And he's, for your value play, he's got, what has he got? 60-point upside anytime he takes the court, right? I mean, he's certainly not shy. So I figured I'd throw him in at 5,600. And I could have picked anybody really, but Malik Monk seemed like a guy to me that would take over some of that role of some of that Bacon role. And Monk's always that guy that everybody's just kind of waiting to kind of break out. So he's got ceiling if he gets the minutes. And obviously I could have gone with Devontae Graham, but again, just for the person building this, the 6,900 I could have done without. I mean, I could probably always use him, but just again for building the shell thing, I just thought it was kind of nice and easy to put in Monk. I put in Karl Anthony Towns just because I kind of had the money to do it. He seems like, I don't know who from San Antonio is going to guard him. Not that anybody can really guard him, but he's under 10K. He's 9,300. He's I could fit him in pretty easily, so I threw him in. The only issue is for now is if I were going to play him in a GPP, if I would need to run him back with anybody, who would that be? And the good news is that we'll talk about this later, I guess, but the San Antonio guys are going to be certainly much lower owned than some of the other guys. So if I did want to run it back with like a DeRozan or something like that, I wouldn't be getting that double chalk effect of having Towns and somebody else. And the last guy in this lineup I threw in, again, it's funny, but Ben McLemore is 3,100, and with Eric Gordon, what is he going into surgery or something like that?
Yeah, he's out.
On the one hand, he's going to step right into the starting lineup at 3,100. Yet on the other hand, I mean, how much usage can the guy have? You know what I mean, on this team? They're going to have either Harden or Westbrook on the court pretty much all 48 minutes. So I don't even know where McLemore's going to pick up so much usage. But at 3,100, I mean, it's kind of hard to kind of leave him out, especially if I'm cheating and I only had 3,400 left anyway, right? So I figured I would just throw him in, and this could be just kind of a building block for where I start, kind of just trying to go for some more lower owned guys.
Yeah, so I really like everybody in this lineup. This is the chalk. I actually think as of this moment, and things may be changing, I think you could play this lineup in cash. Now, I think with the Philly news that there's actually probably some better plays. Yep. I have a little bit even as a Laker fan, I'm having a hard time with this one because the Lakers without, I believe, once you knock AD or LeBron out, that it does make them a completely different team, both offensively and defensively, which gives me some hope for Golden State keeping this close. I don't think that I want to be playing Golden State guys in cash when they have like Green and Russell help, like just because I still think you could be looking at weird blowouts. But so I actually think at the ownerships they're at, I'm sort of like leaning other ways other than LeBron. I'm going to go to a much lower owned Harden probably. That's just a tournament overall strategy. But that game is the one that I'm probably the most nervous about having the least exposure to, the Lakers and Golden State. I get all the logic in it. I just think at these ownerships, there's a lot of pivots. I'm also very interested in the Charlotte-Memphis game like you are. I have found some different ways to run it. I really like PJ Washington tonight. I really like Miles Bridges. I think he's going to be a little bit more popular, Bridges, but PJ Washington, I think, is a guy. And I think that Cody Zeller is in play, believe it or not, getting some minutes back now and in a pretty good matchup. And I totally agree about San Antonio being one of the pivot spots. Those guys, it's a ceiling matchup against a terrible defensive team in the Timberwolves who play fast. They would show up as adequate defensively, but they play so fast they're actually terrible. And they're actually worse than the numbers would even indicate because you had a couple games without Towns, which they were much better defensively. Anyway, I think that's a really good spot.
Good thing, Bobby, is only have like 7 games, so I could just kind of see them all on here. Yeah. So we can go game by game, but I could just kind of see kind of like this overview of all these games right over here. And you could already see different places that you could, that there's all kinds of kind of funny upside. Like, I mean, I'm looking at this Boston Washington game. Now these are guys that, that you and I play a lot. And, whenever we have these conversations, you always just say, well, maybe not in this slate or something like that. But, if you didn't want to get too chalky with something like, with D'Angelo Russell, or even if you wanted to, fade this whole Laker thing. I mean, Kemba really hasn't gotten there too much for us recently, but you get one of those Kemba Bradley Beal kind of up and back games at low ownership. You might be able to get some ceiling out of that.
Yeah, Bradley Beal is a guy I have noted as to get in tournament lineups. When he gets in that 2% owned range and just completely unowned for a guy who can put up sort of like 70 at any given time, I don't like the situation with Isaiah Thomas. We talked about this the other day. I think it actually hurts him a lot because the way the usage works. So I actually think his ceiling, and when he's popular, I tend to like him less these days. But when he's not popular in basically any matchup, I don't really care with Bradley Beal. This could easily be a spot where he goes nuts. And the thing about him is, though, I don't think I would be wanting to play him alone. I agree that Kemba makes some sense. I probably would be more likely to run it back with someone like Tatum because I like a lot of the guards tonight, and I'd rather just play Westbrook and then, maybe throw Tatum in the front court or something like that. I know we're going through all this and we can go through game by game, but I think it's interesting the way you're doing it. You still can keep your core and keep breaking it down. And, then you'll have, the way that you go through your lineups that we were talking about before, you're going to end up being able to get basically a bunch of different pivots and different mini game stacks, even with keeping the same, general core of 8 guys that you probably want to play over 30%, let's say.
So why don't we do that? Why don't we go back to these games then, and then we can go back into my lineup. So you see, people might see in the background, I see 36 entries, right? So what I usually do is I just make this one lineup, and I just pre-enter it in what I'm going to play tonight.
Right.
And so you'll see that this is probably about $400 worth of buy-ins or whatever. Mm-hmm. And what this has is I'll have 2 entries in this is kind of like my main event, my biggest one. So what I'd like to do is kind of get like 2 main, ideas. One of that kind of filter through one lineup here, the other filter through another, like whether it be getting on, I don't know, the Charlotte game, or whether it be getting on the Laker game or something else. And then, these kind of break down into the more spready type of tournaments. Like you see, I pre-entered 20 entries into that $8, $12, whatever that lottery ticket is thing. And so what I could do is each of those 2 kind of constructions, we could break down and make them more and more contrarian because, let's face it, you have to for this type of tournament. And then I'll also have 10 entries in the 20 max where, even though it's a lower buy-in, you actually, I would imagine you don't want it quite as contrarian because it's only 20 max. Yeah. So, 36 entries, that's about the max I can do by hand, but I can do those by hand. You know what I mean? Right. I don't need an optimizer to make 36, especially if I'm starting with kind of 2 ideas. And then you'll see I have 2 single entries. What I'll probably do is take at least some derivative of one of those 2 ideas and make them entry in those 2 single entry tournaments. And likewise, in the 3 entry max, I'll probably put 2 entries in that one, just like that. So what we could do, if you want, we can go back to the game by games, and then we can go back into the construction and see if we can't make any of that work.
Yeah, we'll go game by game. And actually, you know what's interesting? So I'll have my on my side screen, I'm going to pull up my ownership from each of these games, and I don't mind saying it as of where it's at right now. So why don't we start it off then? Let's do that. Let's just take a look, and we could use it whittling down your lineup at the same time, but we could also just talk generally about what we like about each game. So why don't we just click on it? Do you mind doing it on your screen, since that's what we got the share on right now? Just the Minnesota Charlotte game and
Memphis Charlotte.
I'm sorry, Memphis Charlotte. Excuse me. And then why don't you start with your thoughts, and I'll jump into it.
Yeah. So like I was saying before, I mean, like the Memphis Charlotte, I mean, it's Charlotte's, obviously really, really bad. I mean, for lack of a better analytical term, right? And they've been giving up points, and Memphis, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, they're not, they're not such that slow pace team that we all remember. But it's funny when you and I talk about this. I mean, all that kind of stuff is kind of already kind of factored into projections, whichever method you use, whatever projection systems you use. So, I have to make sure to never double count that stuff. Like if I see that, I don't know, that someone's in a really, really good pace up spot and their projection's good, I don't want to give them double credit. I don't want to say, wow, their projection's really, really good and they're in a pace up spot. So it's important I don't do that. But as far as Charlotte goes, as I was saying, I mean, the guys that, I would play are Terry Rozier. I mean, he just seems to be the best value, and he's going to have the ball in his hands and all that good stuff. And the guys that we kind of mentioned before, I mean, Malik Monk, again, I don't know how off the board he's really going to be. I mean, the first ownership projection I looked at, I mean, he's going to get ownership. He just is. But, he's certainly someone to use. And maybe the Devontae Graham thing, it wasn't so long ago, what was like a week ago, that everybody was bragging that they had Devontae Graham at 2% at 5,100. And now he's 6,900. Maybe, this is where it's difficult, right? I mean, is he a $6,900 player? If he's not, I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, is there enough ceiling where he can exceed his projections just because, not that many people are going to play him at 6,900? Do you want to go to?
Well, the interesting thing is, let's just talk about that real quick, because if you do, even though it's a different game, if you're going to talk about playing him at basically the same price as Ben Simmons with no Embiid,
right?
You're really talking about. Look, he's showing 50-point upside. I'm a huge Devontae Graham fan, and I think there's enough value on this slate where you can play him, but you're really asking for a lot from a guy who's got to be pretty efficient from the field. And honestly, it probably would take away enough from Rozier. I think that everybody's going to side more with Rozier, but I do think that you'll get ownership on Graham and you'll see some of both. I like the game environment. I don't think I'm going to play both of them together tonight. I'm going to be very low on Graham personally. That's just the stance I'm taking because I like other players. But in general, I think that the focus for me on this game is, it's really hard for me not to want to play a lot of Rozier, Jaren Jackson, and Miles Bridges. I'm jumping to both sides, but the other guys who I feel a little weird leaving out is Ja Morant. I think that he's in play. I just really like a lot of point guards today. So I'm loading up on point guards and centers, and it's hard for me to find room for Ja Morant, even though I do like him. But you get down, I'm into Washington, I'm into Zeller. I'll be ahead of the field on those guys. I do think Monk is an interesting spot, and I want to just point out that this is a beware situation. I would much prefer him, obviously, at low ownership. I don't know that these minutes projections are going to end up going his way. I wouldn't be surprised if you ended up seeing Graham play even who knows? But it seems like a big jump to assume all of a sudden he's going to get all this work, and you already have Graham getting a lot of the usage off the bench. So I'm just, I don't know how much he can really create with this in the structure of their offense with Rozier and Graham both being so ball dominant. I just want to throw that out there because I'm going to be with the field probably a little ahead on Monk, but that's assuming it's around 20%. Any higher, and I would go completely away from it just because I think there's a chance that honestly he shows up with 25 here a lot of the time, and I don't think that you need that on this slate. There's a lot of other ways.
You make a really good point that we talk about a lot when I have guys like this that are pretty speculative as far as their range of outcomes, I guess. And you're like, well, I'd be worried about that, and it's funny because what you'd be worried about at 1% ownership right, is different than what you might be worried about at 20% ownership, right? So like if he was just some guy that was like going to be 0% owned that I would throw in, it wouldn't be that big a deal. But if he's like a 20% owned guy that I'm really thinking of using, a decent amount, that you don't want to have too much aggravation from guys like that. I mean, like
Exactly.
you remember like last night's slate, like for example, like DSJ, right? DSJ. I mean, I played DSJ last night, and at the beginning of the day, I thought he was going to be like 30% owned. But you know what? People stopped speculating. They didn't think he was going to play. And you want to know the truth? I mean, they did give him a shot. I mean, they gave him minutes,
Yeah,
but
he
he
was
literally
terrible,
turned the ball
yes,
over.
they did.
He turned the ball over every time he touched the ground. But at 0.8% ownership, I can be wrong. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, preaching to the choir. I mean, he killed me last night along with Portis, but that's what the chances you take to win tournaments.
Right.
And this is a game we like. I'm just going to mention real quick a little bit of ownership where I'm at. I have Rozier in at about 35 to 45%. He tends to be in most of my bigger lineups at the moment. I don't mind going other routes though. I'm finding some other plays that I really like in the next game. I think we're going to talk about.
Okay.
I like Jaren Jackson a great deal, but I think that some of the other value might get people off of him a little bit more. And I think that if you can get Jackson in the 20% range, you want to be well ahead of the field on that. So that's where I'm at. I want to be at 30+% on Jackson probably. I want to be ahead of the field on Miles Bridges. It's too cheap for the matchup. I still believe in this kid's talent. They're letting everybody chuck. I think 30 fantasy points to 40 fantasy points is where he ends up here most of the time. And I think there's upside on that. So I have him at about 30% right now. I'm probably going to be a little bit, probably around 25 there, but John Morant, again, probably going to be around 15% with the field. I just find too many of the point guards I like. I do think Dylan Brooks, having the same ownership for him when I'm mass entering makes some sense versus Malik Monk. I think he's going to have less ownership. He's 400 more. He's guaranteed to play probably 30 to 34 minutes. Monk, you're talking about anywhere from 20. I mean, even honestly with Monk, it's realistically 18 to 30 probably. So it's actually kind of a weirdly safer play that's going to have lower ownership. I just think it's worth mentioning, and you get the same game environment. So Dylan Brooks on the other side, but I really think PJ Washington is one to look out for along with Zeller. I have all those guys a little bit ahead of the field, so obviously really heavy on this game. That's just sort of where I'm at.
Well, interesting. Tell me about Dylan Brooks for a second, because I'm still kind of relating our conversation about what's his name, about Kobe White yesterday, where he for him to hit his ceiling, he really needed to shoot the lights out. He happened to have shot the lights out.
He made 7 threes in the fourth quarter, and it, by the way, killed an incredible Zach LaVine at 2%, who was going to get 50 plus.
Yeah.
If not for that.
But guys like this, kind of like, and Tony Snell, and guys like the guys that need to like shoot the lights out, kind of like they become interesting value choices now and then. And I always wonder whether those are the guys you want to take or those guys you want to fade. And I wonder if Dylan Brooks, I mean, is one of those types of dudes. But I guess in his last game, he only took 4 threes out of 17 shots. So I guess it's not. I guess he's not.
He's a gunner. No, I mean, you're accurate with what you said. I mean, he had 5 threes in a game earlier this year, put up 33 in that game. Put up 40 fantasy points in that game against Minnesota. This is a good matchup, and what I would say is that the minutes with him look misleading. He was banged up, and they had 2 blowouts, and one game where Anderson was playing well, I believe it was, and foul trouble. So if you look at the games that have actually mattered, you're talking about 30 minutes basically every night, and you're looking at 33, 32, and 40 fantasy points the last full games that he played. At 4,400, obviously, you'll take 30 to 40 even on this big slate, right?
Yep.
So that's and it's just like a play that's going to end up getting overlooked. And, it's one of those people are going to see it at first. He has projected ownership now. I guarantee you it's going to be lower than what people were projecting it at right now. That's just my personal take. But this whole game obviously has a lot to like. We spent a lot of time on it. Anything else you want to add here before we jump over to?
No, I mean, but again, I always start thinking about ahead, so when you make a really good point on a guy that's 4,400, you say that 40 point upside, and I still keep thinking back that to this Ben McLemore. I mean, at 3,100, do you want it? Maybe I should try to find that extra 1,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? For Ben McLemore, what's his ceiling really going to be? So it's something for me to think about as I go forward in the slate.
Absolutely. And Ben McLemore, by the way, tough matchup, even though it's going to be a fast matchup for Ben McLemore. Certainly a spot where Austin Rivers could get all the minutes and McLemore might just play the beginning of the game and the beginning of the second half, and that could be it. There's a lot of there's more risk there. Obviously, more likely than not, he'll play minutes, but could go other ways. And here's where I'm at in a really weird situation. I am all over this game, and I believe, is this the lowest total on the slate? The Philly-Orlando game. It's the other game that I probably have the most exposure to, particularly on the Philadelphia side. It's just hard for me to ignore at these prices, especially on DraftKings. You see the usage numbers. There's going to be some ownership, but I'll tell you what, we talked about revenge a little bit. Doesn't mean the guys are always going to go off, but it usually means they'll chuck. And I don't hate the idea of playing, not that he feels vengeful. The guy's making $100 million a year, basically one of the highest salaries around, but you're going to have an unowned Tobias Harris in Orlando at 6.7. So it just adds an extra element of me wanting to stack. You play him with Horford and Simmons if you want to, by the way, because it's doable, or just one of them.
Or you didn't see what I put up on my screen, the revenge run back.
I didn't. Which one? I didn't see. I'm looking. Oh, I'm looking at my screen over there. Sorry, we're both on the. Yeah. I mean, that's that. I was going to get over to that too. There's. I actually like Fultz a little bit for tournaments. I would like it better probably if it was in Philly. These teams are competitive too. I don't know that they're just going to turn over and let Fultz do his thing, but I sort of like the idea that he'll play. And I don't think he hates any. He's a nice. I don't know. I don't feel as in love with the narrative there, but I do think it's fine to run both of them anyway. They're fine plays anyway.
Well, Bobby, let's call it what it is. I mean, you're talking about Tobias Harris, right? And if you even think there's even a slight chance that he play a little extra harder or they give him extra minutes, he's still going to project great anyway. You know what I mean? With Embiid out of the game, and the price didn't really adjust. I mean, he's probably a good play whether he's
exactly
whether narrative or not, right?
Sure.
So yeah, okay. So Embiid is out.
Mostly you have a very targeted group of ownership that's going to go to everyone but one guy who is pretty safe for 35, pretty safe to 5x his value, with maybe a little bit of a limited upside, not past 50 probably, unless he really goes nuts. But he ends up between 35 and 50 almost all the time here. He's going to be unowned. He's an extra piece to the stack. So let's say it is close down the stretch, or let's say he gets hot, or let's say that the game goes into overtime. All those are real possibilities. You add that up, and all of a sudden you've got a nice little exposure here, and you run it back. I mean, my favorite run back on the other side is Vucevic, by the way. I absolutely love Vuce. I really liked him against Embiid, by the way, because he's played him really tough in the past. But at 8.3, hard for me to resist. I think this is a really competitive game. I also like Josh Richardson in this game on the Philly side. So I'm very interested in those four Philly starters and in Vuce on the other side with a little bit of Fultz. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, Embiid out. I mean, again, it's you're trying to think of what's going to be owned and what's going to be good chunk, what's going to be bad chunk. I mean, obviously the first guy that I would think people would look at is Simmons, right? And then these other guys like Harris and Horford and Richardson and two. I mean, obviously those guys are all going to be quote unquote good plays, right? Because their prices didn't adjust and Embiid is out, right? So they're probably going to exceed their what their cost is, and the question is, which is going to be better than other guys on the slate and which is going to be low owned. I mean, I guess we couldn't proceed without me asking you again, like we talked about yesterday, is what do you do with with Embiid out? Do you play stuff like Kyle O'Quinn again?
I think it's a reach.
Well, for sure. I mean, but
tonight, I just think that
you don't think 9 minutes is going to do it?
They don't need to. The thing with Embiid being out with Horford there, they don't really need. Like Horford is a center. Like I mean,
right.
That's why I almost like the matchup a little bit worse for Vooch. So the thing is that when Horford's off the court, like that's really all you're talking about, though, because otherwise you just slide Horford over to the 5, and then when Vooch is off the court, you can sort of play anybody to match up with any of these monsters. I don't know.
Well, that's the point. The point you made again is on the one hand, Embiid is out, and one thing I learned, we did a little of this last year, was so many people focus on the fact that okay, Embiid is out. How does that affect Philly, without paying just as much attention to how does that affect Orlando? You know what I mean? Exactly. You made the point that with Embiid out of the game, I mean, like Horford's good and everything, but Vooch is is going to do better against Horford, right? I would imagine, than he would against Embiid. So again, whether Vooch is 8,300, I mean that's probably a good price also.
Yeah.
I would definitely think that Vooch is obviously a big beneficiary of him being out. I love playing Vooch anyway. And if that game stays close, which it should, you probably get his full, 34, 36 minutes?
Yeah, the thing is that I like Vooch. Whether I actually think that even against Embiid, I think it might even been a better matchup. I really like the way Horford defends him, but it's more about the price, and it's also like Philly has turned the ball over more than every team in the NBA. There should be like other opportunities in this game, even though the total is not that high, that people maybe aren't considering. There could be a lot of fantasy production. I think it'll come from the rebounders, which is why Horford is like such a great play in this game, and that's why I like Vooch. I want to point out that part of what I like about Vooch is that he will be completely unowned on FanDuel. And as of right now, I have him in my big buy-in tournaments over there. He's only there's just no way he ends up above 10% over there. And I think you can make a nice little stack of this game over there, which is going to have lower ownership than it will over on DraftKings, with the exception of Ben Simmons. Of course, he'll be popular on both. But I really, really like that, playing the Vooch. And I just think you can get 4 or 5 pieces from this game and have a nice little stack. Anything else from this one before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, you've been higher on John Isaac this year than last year.
Yeah.
I figured I would ask you maybe about him. And Aaron Gordon, again, I refused to play him last year. And I have to think that with Isaac doing better this year, it's probably going to eat into Gordon a little bit. But, again, it's 6-game slate. If you want to get something contrarian and stack this game up a little bit, you got to look to somebody on Orlando, right?
Yeah, I think that it's Vooch is the guy, and then I think that you can definitely consider Fultz, and you can consider DJ Augustine. I know that sounds weird, but that's the way I see if this game staying close. But I don't really love the other stuff. I'm like, everything comes up fine. Fournier's fine. Gordon's fine. I don't love this. Like, Isaac is fine. I always like playing Isaac better, even though he's more expensive on FanDuel, just because you really might see like 4 blocks in like a minute from this guy. Like he's going to end up with one of those 10 stock games, and you're going to end up winning all the money on FanDuel one day at 3% ownership. But I don't think that on DraftKings I'm going to end up playing a ton of Isaac tonight. Realistically, I think there's a lot of places to get different. And like I said, I'm already thinking a little bit different in the slate than most people, because I don't think I'm going to be playing as much of LeBron. I'm sure I'll have some, but we'll get into that in a minute. I do think I'm going to be all over this next game we're going to talk about also. And then honestly, probably going to have less of the later games than I usually do. That's partly why I got to X guys like Isaac out. I really like a lot of spots on this slate. It feels like a 12-game slate.
So this is funny. So all of a sudden, just kind of playing around with what was once a really, really chalky lineup, I got rid of some of the stuff, and I got rid of Towns, and I placed him with a lower owned Vucevic, and probably going to be like a 2% DJ Augustine, and with Jay Rich and Tobias Harris, you get a little stack from this game. And I replaced I got little Malik Monk out. I replaced him with PJ Washington, who you thought might have been a better play. So now there's T. Rozier and Washington, who probably correlate a little better with one another. So T. Rozier is not going to be taking a lot of the guard stuff out of Malik Monk, I suppose. And I still have, LeBron and Kuzma, but already we've reduced the ownership of the lineup considerably.
Yeah, and that's I mean I like that as a different way to build around that one. Let's get into the game that's going to have the highest total after we really like this, or at least I really like this game with the low total. We've got an interesting spot here, because I cannot understand how everyone is just going to assume that James Harden. I get it. LeBron seems like the obvious go-to play, but you're really going to get 10 times the ownership on LeBron that you're going to have on James Harden. I'm a Westbrook guy, and I love Westbrook tonight too, by the way. He's my preferred. But I'm going to have I will have at least 25% James Harden on DraftKings. This is ridiculous. I'm guessing the ownership's going to be wrong, but I just think that you cannot not play this guy. I don't care how tough the matchup is, if it's going to be some Paul George and some Kawhi. James Harden is going to get 50-plus fantasy points. James Harden has the chance to get 80-plus in any matchup. And at no ownership, it feels wrong not to play him at least 25%. That's just my complete take. I'm going to have Westbrook in almost all my lineups, which is why I can't play, too many guys left in the field at point guard, because I basically have named a few of them already. But I will have some with Harden without Westbrook, just because I think that the upside. And I really like PJ Tucker and Capella in this matchup. A little bit of McLemore, but I'm not going crazy with it. And then I don't really have any interest in any Clippers except for on FanDuel, where I'm playing Patrick Beverly. How about you?
Well, I'll tell you, one thing that I'm pretty self-aware of is I like to see what I think of a slate or of a play, And usually what I think of it right off the bat is probably what the public's going to think of it. So then I try to kind of fade myself, if that makes any sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I'm looking at is I'm like, okay, James Harden, he's on a slate where LeBron James is 1,000 less, playing a team that doesn't play any defense, right? And James Harden is 11-7. He's playing against, I don't know who's going to guard him, but it's going to be some combination of Kawhi Leonard, probably the best defender in the history of basketball, right? With Patrick Beverly, God knows what could happen if he gets in his head, right? And
he's going to guard Westbrook. Him and Westbrook have a little rivalry thing,
right? Not to mention Paul George might play. I don't know how many minutes he's going to play or whatever. So on the one hand, my initial thought is wow, you pay 11-7 for a guy in a tough matchup when you got options, you got pay up options like Towns and James, stuff like that. I mean, it just seems like something to go away from. And then what I think about is, okay, so if I think that, and that's what everybody's going to think, and then I think about what we talked about again last year. I mean, you get James Harden at 5% to 10% ownership, you just have to play him. I mean, right. He just, some guys are, I will say matchup proof in the wrong way, but the guy can score 70, 80 points every freaking game. So like I said, I mean, if you're going to get like 50% of the pay up money going to Towns and 50% of the pay up money going to LeBron, if not more, and Harden is going to slip down here, especially 11-7, which is really, really scary in this matchup. I mean, I don't see how he gets owned all that much, except for, casual players who are going to play him anyway. And you're not worried about those people's lineups anyway. I mean, I'm certainly going to play him. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And again, I'm not talking about locking him in. I'm just talking about playing him well above the field at 25% or so. Just because I actually don't think like he even hurts you. Like he can have a bad game and put up 60 plus, and it's not even going to hurt you. You know what I mean? There's still a chance that outscores LeBron. Like it's not like LeBron is this lock to get. LeBron is great for getting high 60s usually. He doesn't usually go much higher. He has obviously, but if you talk about real ceilings, like James Harden has, I think, the highest ceiling on every slate along with Giannis, and I don't think anyone else is quite there anymore.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we like, those are the spots. I think that's pretty much, it for this one. We can move, like, we're going to have some catch me up games.
I don't want to spend I don't want to spend way too much time on this Ben McLemore, but it's just so tempting to get a $3,100 guy starting.
I know. For me, it's a little bit slate dependent because like if you're gonna do that, I think that it makes more sense to take a shot on Rivers at zero ownership if you're playing a game stack. Like that makes a little more sense. But I do think that it's weird though because I don't mind like Rivers can do other things. McLemore, you're counting on him making threes, which is sort of taking away from the other guys who I like a lot. So that's sort of maybe why I don't have quite as much interest. What I do like about him is that he's got small forward eligibility. I'm, again, very guard obsessed today. So on DK, that's a big factor.
Is Ben McLemore that much worse? I mean, I guess the answer is yes. I was going to ask you if he's that much worse than Eric Gordon, but I guess he has to be, right?
Well, I mean, Eric Gordon's been terrible, but so he hasn't been Eric Gordon. So maybe he can be like the thing is, Eric Gordon, I mean, could still go out there and put up 35 fantasy points and put up 16 shots. I don't know. I mean, we've seen Ben McLemore fail in this situation when he didn't have Westbrook and Harden on his team in Sacramento. So I don't really know why we're going to jump into it. I don't think he's going to be as chalky, which is why I'm okay with it. But if he was going to be chalky, I just wouldn't be into it personally.
So before we go away, I mean, I think we're both in agreement that we're not too interested in playing this Clipper stuff. But what are we? Is Paul George what is he going to do? What is he going to play? 25 minutes or what is he? What was the news on him?
So if I had to guess, I would guess 28-ish minutes. I don't think that guys like who are superstars, they tend to. It could be 20. I would say 24 to 28. No way you can play him, in my opinion, even in a good matchup.
Yeah, but he's probably, you'd have to think he takes away from. I mean, you can't play Kawhi up here. Right?
I actually think you can play Kawhi, but I just don't think. I think there's other places that I'm going to end up spending tonight, and that's the truth. Okay. Like I get the argument for Kawhi. I could easily see Kawhi being on the winning thing. I have a different way I want to build. And by the way, if you do play Kawhi and James Harden, you got nobody against you, and that's not the worst combo in the world. That could get you 150 combined or something and put you way ahead of the field.
Well, you'll be ahead of all the James Towns lineups, that's for sure.
Yeah. By the way, side note, is this the best basketball, like the biggest basketball game of the? I think it is. Like, I think this is the actual biggest game of the year so far. Just with Paul George coming back, Houston, who had kind of struggled, had a lot of things out. They've struggled, but they're still winning games right now. they're actually favored in this game. You've got the Clippers with the first game with Kawhi and PG. Like, I just feel like and Westbrook and Beverly have a history, and these two teams are both title contenders. Don't you think this is kind of like the biggest game so far?
Hey, I mean, if you think it's better than than Markelle Fultz against Tobias Harris revenge, I mean, that's your call. But I mean, yeah, I could see why you would think that for sure.
All right, man. Well, let's move over to the next one. I am excited about that one. I actually want to watch that one later tonight. We got Washington and Boston here. Again, we talked about this before, just from a pure game theory perspective. I think having just 10% Bradley Beal lineups is probably a good way to go. I would only do it probably if I was playing one of the Celtics on the other side, just because I like a lot of plays on this slate, so I need to have an excuse to run back. And I like Tatum. I actually like Rui Hachimura a ton. He's probably my favorite play in this game. But I would like to play like one of Tatum or one of those other guys I was going to play Beal. Otherwise, I'm going to dabble with a little bit of Isaiah Thomas revenge. Why not?
Well, again, and this is the question I asked you also, is with Thomas back, is it probably suboptimal to play them together, I would imagine, him
Yes.
and Beal.
Yeah, I don't think you can play Beal and Thomas together personally. I think playing Beal is already a risky proposition. Like, you're doing it for the ownership's sake on this slate, but like, I really don't mind the idea of running him with a Tatum or a Walker or a Brown on the other side. But I really do like Rui Hachimura regardless. And if you're going to play those other guys, may as well throw Rui in there because he's 4,700. The game's close. Like, he's every time the game's close, he puts up 30-plus fantasy points.
And what about these other Boston guys? I mean, with Hayward out, what do you think? Is Tice playing?
No Tice.
Well, I mean, was it Robert Williams?
Yeah, I think he's actually going to get more ownership than I'm going to be willing to give him. Maybe I'll give him some. I mean, he's in a couple of my lineups, but I don't think that he's great value. I don't think his minutes change. I mean, we just saw the same situation without Cantor. He was in the exact same spot he's in right now, and he didn't do anything. Like, why to get on him now doesn't really make sense to me, because you can also play Grant Williams if you're Washington. Sure, if you're Boston, sure, the matchup is good. But, like, it just feels like, okay, he's going to play his 20 minutes. He played his 20 minutes. Even the game where Tice and Cantor were out, he only played 20 minutes. They split it between him and Grant, basically. So, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like I'm not excited about it.
Boy, if you can get me a $3,500 player from
35.
Washington, Boston, Philly, Orlando, or Charlotte.
What do you got here? Let's see. I just stopped looking for a second.
Well, now we have a Beal with Hachimura with Tatum.
I like that.
There's McLemore as a thorn in my side, though. So maybe there's a $3,500 guard that we could.
There is.
We could put Beal in. We could put Beal there, and then we could find anybody at $3,500.
Yeah, Rodney Hood is, I think, the guy who I have at 3,500, but I don't love it.
Is he not out?
If he plays.
I got one. Oh no, you're not gonna like this. Hold on.
Who is it?
Oh no, you're gonna hate it.
Probably.
I'm gonna put it in anyway. This is a guy I play sometimes. And okay, so here. There you go.
I can't even see it.
You're good, because I blocked it out.
Oh my God, I don't know about what's gonna happen with Bertan's minutes tonight, man.
Yeah, I know. So we'll hold off on it. But
I actually don't mind it though. It's actually a pretty good idea. Like, he's more in play than I originally had him listed for. Like, he'll play some minutes tonight.
So Grant Williams isn't going to play that much tonight, is he?
Yeah, we just leave it out. I think there's too many other spots here.
All right. Okay. So we covered this game, right?
Yeah.
Thomas Bryant. I sometimes play him. But I didn't have my eye on him today.
No, I think that it just, for me, like, in the stacks, anything's fine, but I don't really want to get too heavily involved on that one on this slate, even though it's an up-paced game for Boston. I'm okay with all of the Boston guys. I just don't feel like I need them.
Okay. Where are we, San Antonio?
Yeah.
So again, I mean, as far as I was concerned, I mean, we kind of looked at this before, but Cat at 9,300 is kind of rough. I mean, he's kind of rough to fade in a way. I mean, he's just a freaking beast.
Yeah.
And kind of nobody could guard him. I mean, he was the only guy I was looking at on this side really as being enough of a value to kind of play.
I've got a guy.
I wasn't really looking at these other guys, so maybe we could talk about some more of this stuff. Is Teague is he's questionable again?
Well, now you'll know why I'm off the Laker game or more so. But Teague is questionable. If he plays, I'm assuming he plays, and I'm going to play him.
Okay.
He's 4,600. I'll probably have at least 30 to 40%. I will have at least 30 to 50% of town, somewhere in that range. I don't know exactly where. But I really like the bring it back options that no ownership. Aldridge, DeRozan, people are not going to play these guys. They're really cheap. I also like Covington in this game if you want to get into the stack. This is an up-paced matchup for San Antonio. It's a great spot for DeJounte Murray, but you're just got the minutes issue. But I don't mind even playing him. I just prefer the other guys because you got a higher minute ceiling with DeRozan and Aldridge. I love both those guys. I think Aldridge would be my preferred play because he's not a guard. And he's a little cheaper, and I feel like 50 happens more reasonably, but I like it for both of them. I really like this game spot. I really like the Aldridge or DeRozan or Murray, or even Gay. I don't mind him either, but I don't think I'll end up going there. But I think it's one of those three for me with Towns and Teague and potentially even Covington if I wanted to.
Well, let's talk about correlation again for a second. So if you're going to play these guys, right? On the one hand, you think that Towns, Covington, and Teague are not that bad to have in together because they all kind of do different things, right?
And the prices are cheap enough and the minutes are secure. That's really it. They're just too cheap and the minutes are secure, I guess. That's the best answer I can give you.
Yeah.
So there's not anybody.
I'm already kind of playing with this to see what happens if we do some San Antonio, Minnesota business. We could do some. Let's go back to Jaren Jackson again in that Memphis game. And we got all kinds of money for shooting guard.
And I do like these little mini stacks in this game. I also just think all these guys make sense as individual plays as well. Teague, Towns, and Aldridge being my preferred one.
Right. You could play a lot of stuff here, can't you?
I mean, this game gets it's got a high total. Beware of late news. You never know with San Antonio. I'm just going to say that because that could change things a lot. So it does give I like the early games, unfortunately, but it does give you like a little bit of an edge if you are playing the Lakers or whatever, and maybe at 4:45 or 7:45 Eastern, you get the news. But I don't know. I personally think this is a really good spot for both teams, even if everyone's healthy. So
I guess I would be remiss to say to ask what Covington is on FanDuel, just because of his the steals and blocks and stuff.
I didn't end up finding myself with him much on FanDuel, but I don't entirely know why. Let me take a quick look.
Okay, I didn't even look.
He's 57, which actually is a good price. So I actually probably would put him a little bit more. I'm getting a little confused by his minutes projections jumping all over the place everywhere I look. So I have him between 25 and 34. Like, I just think that's a really weird range for a guy who's pretty consistent minutes wise. So I don't really know what's up with that. I think it might just be the Teague question mark. So
right.
Anyway, I like Covington on both sides.
All right, let's go. Toronto and Portland. We talked about this yesterday. Freaking, what's his name? Pascal Siakam's just the real deal, right? I mean, he's I don't know about 8,700 today, but he's really playing well. I've actually seen him play some kind of, I don't want to say point guard per se, but he's like he brings the ball up sometimes. I don't know what his usage rate is off the top of my head, but he looks really, really good. And if you're going to play this game for Toronto, I mean, I guess that would be the first guy I would start with. And then the second guy, the next two guys that to me are kind of deciding points on Toronto are the two kind of value power forwards that kind of got there. I guess the best way to describe it the other day was RHJ and Boucher, right? I mean, they were both.
They also got very fortunate that Anunoby got hurt.
Oh, for sure. But RHJ was literally $3K, And
Right.
Boucher, I don't know what he was at 3,400. And they've both been priced up, but still, I mean, I don't know who's going to get the minutes. I don't even know if they're necessarily even fighting for the same minutes. I did see them play a little bit together. I guess you could pull up Popcorn, some of the other sites and figure out.
Yeah. They'll play some both ways. They'll play some together. So they'll play some not together. Hollis Jefferson is switchable. He can like he played guard before, so it's fine. He can play anywhere from 2 through 5.
And he could and RHJ. It's funny. We talked about him the other day when I was talking about him. He's like, well, when's the last time a guy like that even played 30 minutes, right?
Yeah. All of a sudden.
So and he, not like he was good or anything. He was just he just played 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? You play 30 minutes, you're gonna amass fantasy points if you're that kind of player.
Yeah.
And those are the other two guys. I didn't really look at the other guys that like Van Vliet. I mean, he's 7,100. And I guess I just don't want to be biased, right? I don't want to remember the days that we played him at 4K, right? I mean, he happens to be, I guess like it or not, he happens to be a real high usage guy now, I guess. So I can't just exclude him from my player pool. But as you were saying, I mean, if this were a slate where you liked a bunch of guards, maybe he wouldn't crack it for me. I would probably, if I were going to play different Toronto guys, I would go back to maybe, I don't know, back to Norman Powell or something like that. Or if you really want to get off the board, I don't know what Terrence Davis is going to do, maybe go back to him or something like that. But, I mean, I presume that Lowry's still out, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't even be a discussion.
Yeah. Lowry,
and for whatever reason, I never play. I just don't play Marc Gasol. He just never pops for me. And the thing is, when he does pop for me, he just doesn't look like, I don't know, like especially in GPPs, I've never really been able to get that ceiling out of him. I guess maybe I'm on him in the wrong times, I suppose. But
he hasn't really been there in a while since he's been in Toronto, except for in some games that mattered down the stretch, I would say last year. But like, on this team, he doesn't have as much. I don't have a ton of interest in him. I'm having a sort of like a with the field type of situation with this team. Maybe a little bit under on Siakam. I definitely understand the game stack here. I just think I'm a little bit off this because I like some of the other games better. Whiteside is going to be really popular. I'm going to have less than the field on him. I like him fine tonight. I know it's back-to-back. They only played 21 minutes last night. Hollis Jefferson, same thing. I want to be with the field. I don't think I want to go crazy over the field on these guys. I think the ownership is going to be a little bit higher than I think it necessarily should be. Both teams on back-to-backs could be a little bit – Portland on back-to-back could be a little bit sluggish even at home. Like, I don't know. I'm not as enthused, but I'm going to have exposure probably about with the field for pretty much the main guys in this game. And that's sort of where I'm at. It's kind of a boring answer, but I don't really want to go crazy with it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the Lillards and the McCollums on the other side too. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I just really like playing those guys in, I don't know, I don't want to say more exciting games in the wrong way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it just, I don't know. I guess it's feel. I guess it's whatever. But I much prefer Lillard in a game like last night, right?
You'd think. Unfortunately, this might be the game that's more like last night. I do like Lillard, and I'm fine with all these guys tonight, including McCollum. But I find myself being more with the field. I just like a lot of other plays a little bit better, and that's why I don't have as much ownership in this late game as I normally would.
I'm looking at these. I see Lillard at 9,200, and then I see, I don't know. Even though this guy hasn't really done it for me yet, but Kemba Walker against Washington defense at 8,600 is pretty
interesting.
Pretty fun.
I agree. I think Kemba is definitely a nice pivot off of. I think Lillard's going to get pretty chalky. So I totally agree with that. Should we move into the closeout game, the Lakers and Warriors? All right, so let's talk about the Lakers and Warriors real quick because I totally get stacking and semi-stacking this game like you had in your original build. I think that makes sense. I think it's somewhat chalky, so you probably find other ways to differentiate. Jordan Poole is another guy who I would say you can play over Malik Monk. I think they'll probably have similar ownership.
Yeah, you would think that, right? But he's like going to be take 20%, right?
Yeah, I think that Poole is actually a better play in a lot of ways. He's going to have more minutes. They're similar players, but Poole could end up getting more of an offensive load. I'm not overwhelmingly thrilled, obviously, with either of them, but I do think they're both in play, and I'll probably have about the same of both of those guys. For me, honestly, with the way that my builds are going, the guys I have the most exposure to in this game outside of Kuzma are JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard. Without Davis, the rebounds are there for them. I don't know which one it'll be. They're both cheap and both have upside. I think that Howard is probably the higher ceiling play. McGee probably gets to 30 more often, I would say. I don't know. It's pretty close. I guess I would lean slightly towards Howard, but you need the extra 600. McGee's right there. I do think they're both interesting, as is WCS on the other side, just the wrong slate for me. But I'm not playing as much. I got to be underweight somewhere. I'm going to have some D'Angelo, but I'm going to be under the field probably, and I'm going to be under the field on LeBron because I have to make a stand.
Well, you know what could prevent McGee or Howard from getting, those 20 rebounds? When Draymond Green gets a triple-double.
That's the other one. That's the other part of this game that is appealing to me. I think when can you get Draymond Green expected to play 30 minutes at 5,600 and have not no ownership, but just less ownership, not 30% owned? That's pretty wild.
Well, now you have to prevent me from going completely off the rails here. So what if you wanted to take kind of like chalky guys, but not like chalky constructions? In other words, like if you were going to play like Russell and Green, for example, together, and just bring it back with Kuzma, right? Don't even use LeBron at all, and then do something ridiculous like take Harden. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
that could be a way to get a low owned stack of that Golden State game. And again, you could just root for LeBron to just get his 55 or 60 or something like that.
Absolutely, and he can even get 70 and not kill you depending on what Harden does, or you could even skip the Harden part of it and just go with a different type of build. Just even throw in a Howard or McGee with the 4-man stack without LeBron. People are not going to be stacking this game and leaving LeBron out of it. So if you stack it without LeBron and then get your favorite part of like the 8K guys and the other, maybe the Houston game, or just the Minnesota San Antonio game, the 9K Cat, and you run it back with one of those guys, all of a sudden you got a very different build. So I actually really like that idea.
Well, we used to play Capella and Harden together.
I'm okay, and I like Capella. I think he's going to have ownership tonight. I think people are going to be on Capella. And we don't get to play our revenge Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell. This is a real revengey kind of night too. It's just kind of a weird one because there's just a lot of mouths to feed on some of these teams that have.
There's a lot going on with that Clipper game for sure.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I enjoyed this. I think we're going to do some other ones. I think we're going to do another one with an interview talking a little bit about your background and your history in poker.
Sure.
And I'm not going to share my thing because we went on a little bit longer going game by game, but I appreciate you hanging out here with us and showing us the build, and hopefully this will be the first of many.
No problem. And now I got to go figure out what to. Now the other thing again, just to remind everybody that we're when are we doing this? Like 4:40?
Yep.
In like 2 hours when they rule out LeBron also. Then everything changes. All that work is out the window. then everything changes. But hey, I really enjoyed this, and we'll do it again.
Absolutely. Sounds great, buddy. We'll talk shortly. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We are out of here. We'll have some other videos up tomorrow.